Hello, good morning, everyone. Okay, it is almost 10 o'clock. Um, yes, the timing. First of all, hello, my name is Shannon. I know you were probably expecting Sarah Silver to be your facilitator today. She sends her apology. Something had come up for her. She was not able to be here with you today. I will try to fill in the best that I can. I have had a lot of experience with loose parts myself. With her information and some of my own, hopefully we can give you an informative morning. I was told it was 10 to 12 for the timing. My understanding is that the company opens it up early so people can get in and get settled. Um, if you do need to leave, like Kristen, if you do need to leave, I know the session's being recorded, and I'm not sure how it'll be available, but I know that I think Jill Piers uh, will probably send something out to make the recordings available after the fact as well too. So totally understand if you need to leave. Don't change your plans for it. But let's see how the morning goes. Thank you for joining us. And hello, yes, again, my name is Shannon Harrison. I am an early childhood development consultant with the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development. So I work in the early years branch and work with regulated childcare programs. So my role is to provide supports and resources for programs um, as they go through their day-to-day operations and look at how they want to improve their programs. And so I'm just kind of, a resource person for people. I'm a lifelong early childhood educator, 34 years now that I've been in this sector. I started out working with toddlers, and I've had various hats along the way. And I have to say that toddlers is where I've had most of my experience as an ECE. I've worked with all the age groups. But admittedly, infants I have not worked with as much. But I've been around infants a lot in my role, and the more I'm with them, the more amazed I am at what the capabilities are at that age. So um, sorry, yeah. I just want to get a sense as well. I guess I can move that. Looking at who we have here with us as well. So I just want to get a sense. I'm going to ask a question. Uh, what age group do you all work with? Sorry, I have to type it up as I go here. So it's just going to take me a second to get the options there. And one more. Okay, so I have published a poll, and I do believe on this platform that on the sidebar you can open up. It gives you a chat window with polls and a Q&A little tabs at the top. So if you can find your way to that, then you can see a question in the poll section, and we'll get a sense of who we are as a group. Are you able to see the poll? You can? Okay. Oh, great. You know what? I wonder. I have to. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Sorry, this is a new platform for me as well. I've done a couple of workshops in here now and still learning the little different nuances between this one and other platforms. So I do believe now you can see the results. So we do have all preschool educators here with us today. So some of the examples that Sarah has provided, some of my examples are with infants and toddlers. But knowing that, you can see what they're capable of doing and then expand on it even more with preschool age children. So the next question I'm going to ask, and I have to type it out again, is I guess I want to know, like, what is your experience with loose parts, or what is your comfort level maybe, or experience. Let's say experience with using loose parts in your classroom. So I'll say maybe not in use yet. And we have an option to say use them sometimes, or have a few types of loose parts. And then we can say that they are a big part of our classroom. Okay, so here's another question. So not the most wide-ranging of answers, but just get a feel for how you've used loose parts so far in your classroom. Okay, so we have some votes coming in. So use some of them. Some people use them sometimes, and some say a big part of the classroom. So today, I'm sure you'll get some ideas and some inspirations. This is going to be more than just about ideas for loose parts, though. There's other considerations as well that we're going to discuss around morning too. So we will, there we go, we have 50-50. So half people have them sometimes. Maybe I could ask something more curious about it, and some big part of the classroom. So you can help with some examples as well. So, okay, my journey with loose parts. So I would say I probably started hearing the term, I would say even 15, 10, or 13 years ago, 12 or 13 years ago. I was working in a toddler classroom, and I was just starting to hear more about, just getting rid of plastic and the idea of creating more natural environments. And so in my research and my readings and my conversations, started seeing, well, what do you replace the plastic with, right? And looking at more of a natural environment, and the extension of looking at our natural environments is having loose parts within that environment. So very slowly, I started learning more about it. I have to admit, I'm a very linear thinker. And when I see an object, I see it as, its intended use. And that's all it is in my mind to me. And so it was very hard for me to wrap my head around loose parts, because I kept asking, well, what are they going to do with them? Well, what can you do with it? Well, how would that work? And the added complexity with the infants and toddlers as well, of course, is safety, right? And so knowing that, that for infants and toddlers, you've got a choke tube, and that everything has to not fit within that. So that made the gathering of materials a little bit more challenging. But slowly I started to just, I'll just maybe put some things out, and I would say it took a few years of just trying things out, and maybe started to change my thinking when I was out and about, right? When I was maybe at the Value Village or the dollar store things. But I still struggle with just letting go of all of my adult understandings already, and getting rid of any preconceived ideas with loose parts. I had a coworker who was brilliant with setting up invitations, provocations, bringing in loose parts, and creating a magic filled environment of just wonder and awe. And I actually, I just wanted to know how she thought and how, how she came up with these ideas. And so um, I said, I want to come with you to Value Village. I want to follow you around. I want to see your thought process. I want to, see you in action. So I did. I went with her to Value Village, and for 2 hours we walked around the store, and she would pick something up and then put it back. I'm like, why'd you put that back? Why'd you put it in there? Why did you put that back? And sometimes it was because it was too expensive. Value Village is getting more and more expensive. I find too that it's not the value that it once used to be. So, I just really tried to get inside her head and think about that. Kristen, your lead as a loose parts cupboard with all types of loose parts in jars. How to incorporate them more. Okay. And Jenny, you have a shelf full of loose parts. Great. Oh, sorry. Did I miss something else too? Oh, there, another chat. Oh, okay, great. All right. So great. So you'll have lots of things to share when we get to things like thinking about how to organize loose parts and things too, because that's the other challenge as well. So it took me a while to, first of all, let go of my adult understandings and preconceptions, and also to gather a rich variety of loose parts that we could have available to use with toddlers. So, in my other classrooms in the center, I would watch and see what they brought in, and was really, really impressed with how our whole center really took to this. And over a few years, less and less plastic in the room, and so I'm going to share some examples from my program, and you can certainly see how it could be adapted to older children as well. So when I think about seeing children with loose parts and seeing how their attention changes and how much more they can focus, and it reminds me of thinking about passion, and just thinking about, do you have a passion? Like, what is your passion? If you feel comfortable, go on chat, go on mic. What's a passion of yours that really, time seems to just disappear when you're in the middle of it? What's something that you really enjoy doing? Music. Listening to music, playing music, arts. All of it. Moving, dancing, listening, playing, right? Open-ended art. Gardening. Storytelling. Wow. I wish I was a better storyteller. Well, so much about art. I also admire arts as well. I don't see myself as a creative person, and I can pinpoint the moment in my childhood where I lost my creativity. But I won't bore you with that story. But I've always been very much about coloring in the lines, making sure things are right colors and stuff. But I just don't feel like I could do it, but I know I can. But I mean, so I have other passions as well too that time seems to disappear. Gardening is one for me, Josie. I wouldn't say I'm a gardener, but when I am in my garden, I just zen. I just like time just disappears. I don't do anything. I don't think of anything. I don't listen to music. It's something about being, yeah, time flies. It's about being in nature and in the dirt, and just being outside, and yeah, it takes me a few minutes to get started, but when I'm out there I really do enjoy it. And so I understand that the time flies, and when you just don't think of anything and you're in this state. um Melanie, that's actually a little similar to how my aversion to creativity started as well. I guess I can tell the story. I had a babysitter when I was young, and I can still see it in 1970s. So you can imagine the big flowery orangey wallpaper, in this kitchen with the vinyl chairs and a table, and I was doing a coloring sheet, and I was coloring the grass blue and the sky green. And I remember that part. I remember that much. And then the babysitter's son, I remember him too. He's big, he's tall. I don't know how old he would have been, but he's curly red hair. So, oh my God, that's so stupid. The grass is green, the sky is blue. And that was the moment. I really remember that moment. So, it's funny how those moments from our childhood stick with us. But knowing how important that open-ended art is, and Chris, I think the open-ended process is, loose parts is made for that kind of open-ended processes, right? Trying to primary school teacher taught a lot of product focus art. You know what? And that was the same for early childhood for many, many decades as well too. I certainly, when I started out in the late 80s and early 90s, it was all about what I call now cookie cutter art, right? Where everything looks the same on the wall, and you've got 10 turkey handprints with feathers or things or whatever it may be. And over the years, learning about process art and how the process is more important than the end product at the age of the early years, right? As children get older, they do get more product oriented. But I think if you have an open-ended experience, they can create their own products, right? They don't have to worry about creating a model. So definitely a lot of arts. That's wonderful. A lot of, a lot of passions out there too. So what happens when you are engaged in your passion, right? When you think about that, when you think about, we already talked a little bit about that. Time flies, time stands still, or the world just disappears around you, right? And you just get so engrossed in that. So, everything disappears. Does time seem to pass really quickly, right? Or do you ever say the word, you're in the zone, right? When you get in the zone and you just can so be hyper focused on something and to avoid all distractions around you, right? So thinking about getting in that zone and thinking about our children, having an opportunity for them to get in the zone. So there's actually studies on this. I'm looking at the state of flow and this a state of zones and calling it like a state of flow. So if you're interested to learn more about flow, oops, I didn't, sorry, I did not close my office door. We have a visitor. Oh, now we're going to have two visitors. Sorry, I am working from home today, and so I do have a cat and dog that may just poke their heads in. Hello? Yes? Sorry, I forgot. If I closed the door, they would have started barking and scratching at the door because my door is never closed. So apologies, or else not apologies if you enjoy a little sideshow there. All right, so I know I cannot say his name, but Mihaly, if you just Google TED Talk flow on that name, really talks a lot about the state of flow and about what it feels like to be, oh dear, to be exploring a passion. And sorry, he'll settle down. To be exploring a passion, right? And so I really thought about that more and more in my classroom, but how can I create the state of flow for children? And of course, the first thing being a large uninterrupted time for them to be able to get deeply involved in their play. So, and that's where loose parts can really enhance the state of flow, right? Because there's no one right way to work with them. Every child can take them and use them as they will and incorporate them into their play and into their experiences. So state of flow, it says there's 10 things that happen, right? So there's clear goals, there's concentration, right? A loss of the feeling of self-consciousness, like you don't care, or like like playing, listening, moving, dancing. Another thing, I don't dance, and who cares? You just, when you're so engrossed in that, like who cares? Like I sing a lot. I certainly sing in my classrooms all the time, and I'm not self-conscious at all about the voice. Toddlers and preschoolers don't care if we're in tune, right? So just not worrying about that. Distorted sense of time, either like you said, time flies really quickly, or time just kind of disappears, and you get direct and immediate feedback from what you're doing and what you're interacting with, right? You get the rewards, you get the motivations continually. And you find the balance because children will challenge themselves. They'll want to figure things out. They'll want to try to make things work. Sense of personal control over the situation. So when it's child initiated, I don't want to say child led. I find that a lot of ECEs are taking that to mean like child led, that we're kind of hands off with it. And I think it's gone too far from teacher directed to maybe too far to child led. And I want to try to encourage people to bring it back to the middle, to have a more of a co-constructed, it's called co-constructed learning, or a back and forth where you're equally involved in creating your environments. So, personal control over the situation or activity where the children have the ability to use the materials. The activity is intrinsically rewarding. Lack of awareness of bodily needs. Like, have you ever been like, sometimes I'd be working in my office and realize it's been 7 hours and I haven't gone to the bathroom yet, even, or something, right? Like, I don't know, for 7 hours, but like or I haven't eaten for 6 hours, like that. I'm not even hungry. Like, you've had those moments where you just get in that so hyper focused, right, that you don't even think about eating or realize it's been that long since you've gone to the bathroom. Nearing the focus activity, narrowing your attention down, right? So all of these things can happen in our classrooms, and we can set up the environment so that children can really experience a state of flow. Part of it is looking at our routines, making sure we have large blocks of uninterrupted time inside and outside, but also then looking at what do we put in those rooms. So loose parts can give us a way to talk about the fascinations of children, right? To give structure to that, and to give them experiences to continue with those fascinations. Might actually understand what's behind those fascinations. Sometimes we can't always articulate or understand what could be their motivations, and so sometimes putting loose parts out can see that in action, see their thinking, and better support their interest in their learning. So loose parts are completely open-ended. They're wide-ranging, and they can be anything. So I'm going to play a short video. Sir Ken Robinson, I don't know if that name is familiar to you, but he was a visionary educator, and someone that earlier on in my career I started, maybe, I don't know, I don't even know when, I started listening to him. And one of his TED Talks is about are we killing creativity in our schools? And he's an educator talking about older children, but also a lot of his information, a lot of his teachings can be applied to any age. So he passed away 3 years ago, yesterday, actually. I'm just going to give you a 1:30 video to kind of set the stage for the possibilities.
There are very few things that set us apart from the rest of life on Earth. At the heart of them, I believe, is our inexhaustible power of imagination. Imagination is the ability to bring into mind things that aren't present. With imagination, we can anticipate the future. We can revisit the past. We can step outside the present moment and try and see things as other people see them. It's through creativity that we develop our architecture, our scientific proofs, and our works of art. We don't just live in the world as we find it. We create civilizations, theories, technologies, and we reach beyond the planet.
In honor of the life and work of Sir Ken Robinson, TED-Ed invites you to reimagine the aspects of life we take for granted by finishing the sentence, imagine if. Visit ed.ted.com/imagineif to learn more.
So just imagine if, right? Just having that question in your mind. Imagine if dot dot dot. What would it look like, right? What could it look like in our classrooms? Imagine if we had unlimited time, if we had unlimited resources. Imagine if, what could that look like, and how could we take little baby steps to get there? So again, another scholar I really encourage you to learn more about if you haven't yet. Ken Robinson, Sir Ken Robinson. He is knighted, but yeah. So just another thread for you to explore. But imagining, right? And I think our young children are brilliant with their ability to imagine if, right? They don't have those societal constraints put upon them yet. So, they are born to be curious, to explore, to engage, take apart, see endless possibilities, invent, put together, and rearrange, right? They feel the world is filled with endless possibilities and opportunities, and they'll do all of this with all the things that are in their reach, right? Anything in their reach, they're going to be curious about it. They're going to explore. They're going to take it apart, right? Figure out how it works, rearrange things. And so as educators, it's our role to foster this enthusiasm, right? We want to encourage that. We want to see how can we make even more of that enthusiasm. We want to provide open-ended materials. Not to say that closed-ended materials, they have their place. Certainly there's a lot of value in some closed-ended materials. Puzzles, an example, right? There's only one right way to be successful with the puzzle. Interestingly, when we think of blocks as open-ended and we think of Lego as open-ended, but technically speaking, Lego are actually not blocks, because to be successful with Lego, you can only put them together one way, right? So you have to put one on top of the other and click it together. And so, not that it's not close-ended, it isn't close-ended, because what you can do with Lego is phenomenal, like the creativity, imagination with Lego. But just in terms of being successful, you have to put one on top of another and click it together. Whereas like wooden blocks, there's no one way to be successful, right? So that's kind of a little distinction between closed-ended and open-ended. But there's still a lot of value in those closed-ended materials. I want to encourage the exploration, right? Set up our environments, our time, our schedules, to let them do that. And then think about our environments, like unlimited possibilities. And like I had to do, let go of all the preconceived ideas in my own mind. So Simon Nicholson, in any environment, both the degree of inventiveness and creativity and the possibility of discovery are directly proportional to the number and kind of variables in it. So Simon Nicholson is actually the person who first coined the term loose parts. And he was an architect in the 1970s. So the term has been around, the concept's been around for a long time. And I think in ECE, we started picking up on that I don't even know, for me, again, like it was the early 2000s, but it's really resurfacing in our early childhood environments, because it's got such a strong influence in building children's competencies, right? Their creativity, their independent thinking. And Nicholson believed it's the loose parts that do empower our creativity. So I found it interesting that this concept's been around for almost as long as I have. But it's, that is something that I love, that early childhood has taken an idea from architecture and incorporated into our philosophies as well. So loose parts are, everywhere. There's no end of what we can use for loose parts. So if we were in person, there would be a lot of loose parts, and we would be doing a lot of playing. So we're a little limited in terms of the possibilities online. But one thing I thought we could do is, we're going to take 10 minutes. So it's 10:28 now. So we're going to take 10 minutes and just walk around your space and look for materials that you could maybe introduce as loose parts. And we don't have a lot of them, but you have something that you could expand on and introduce as loose parts to a group. So if you want, again, this is totally optional, but you can come back. When you come back, you can explain it in the chat or go on mic and share your materials with the group. So how does that sound? That's something that, I mean, of course I always want to make things according to the group. So is that something that you want to do? Then we can just do a little scavenger hunt in our own houses and places and see what we can come up with. How does that sound? Sounds good. Okay. All right. So let us do that then. So we'll say come back at 10:40. It also gives you a chance to get up from the computer and I don't think it's good to have us in front of these screens for all days. So let's do that. It's 10:30 now officially. So come back at 10:40 and bring something that you can describe to the group, or if you wanted to be brave and go on camera and you can show us as well. So let's do that for the next 10 minutes. I'll put a note in the chat too. Okay, we have some ideas already. A couple more minutes, so we'll give a couple more minutes in case anyone's still digging around. Okay, we'll say one more minute. Oh, great idea, Jenny, getting the kids involved in the scavenger hunt. Cool. Seashells, sea glass, pebbles. Oh, yeah, something magical about sea glass. Center I worked at was very close to Point Pleasant Park, and our preschool children and 4-year-olds would often go down. They actually had a beach. They called it Sea Glass Beach, and often would find sea glass. That's why they called it Sea Glass Beach. My toddlers, it was a little too far for my toddlers to get to, but they were always coming back with sea glass and using them in very creative ways. Pebbles. The Pebbles I used to go. I don't know if anyone, not many people know this, but Scotts Bay. You know, up Scotts Bay is up past Canning, up towards Cape Split. Uh, there's Scotts Bay is a rocky beach, but they have what's called Fundy marbles, and I actually don't have any here. I actually took them to my office. They're on a little bowl on my desk, but they're if you go to Scotts Bay. And search, you'll find almost perfectly round marbles, like they're granite. I think this is one type of rock. It's a very specific color type of rock. I think it's a granite type rock, but the Scott's Bay being the end of the Fundy tides, like it's such a force that comes in and out there that I just someone told me they were called Fundy marbles, and I used to collect those all the time. We'd go up there just to get those to have them in our classrooms. But I need to go back there. It's been a while. So leftover material, colors, textures, mason lid jars. Oh yeah, that would be great. And bands, paper towel rolls, skewers, coffee filters, yarn, clips, toothpicks, empty tape roll. Interesting. Lace, picture frames, spools, buttons. Oh yeah. Kitchen utensils, clothespins, pots and pans. Right. Great ideas. I have to admit that since I haven't been in the classroom, I'm like we're very good at collecting materials, right, and saving them just in case we could use them in our classrooms. And so I've started to get kind of not out of that habit of seeing things and that'll be good for my room, or I'll save that for later. And so I don't have a lot of loose parts, but it's realize that yeah, I do. Of course I do. Coffee filters and paper towel rolls and spools, buttons. Buttons are great. My mom has such a button collection. I loved it when I was a child playing with her button collection. Just the big metal tub full of buttons. Mm. Oh yeah, the idea the beach, like it's not a sandy beach, so it's not one where you can lounge around, but it's yeah, Scotts Bay. it's like literally the end of the Fundy, like, the waves that come in and out there. So great marbles there. Newborn triplets, tins and scoops. Oh, the tins, those are great drums. And the scoops are perfect size for little hands, aren't they? Newborn triplets, my goodness. Whew, busy. Wow. Great, lots of ideas. I did too. I kind of thought, oh, I guess I should do this too if I'm asking others. So I'm like going around, going, what could I show? What could I show? I actually do have a bag of popsicle sticks that I was using. My dog trainer, said, if you're ever wondering what to do for like, if I'm in a training session, and so he said, put different skills on one on each popsicle stick, and then pull one out and say, okay, we're going to work on our mat for the next 5 minutes, or work on the down, or whatever like that. So I bought these, and I have a jar with different training strategies that we use. So I know these have been around forever in terms of craft materials, right? I certainly played with them as a child, and mostly what I did though was just to, build those log cabins, right? So you put two this way, and then you put two that way, and then you just kind of build up, like that, right? Build up a log cabin. That's pretty much all I did with them, though. Again, I guess I have that kind of building mind all the time. So yeah, wonderful ideas there, absolutely. And I think, the dollar store is a great place for finding, fairly decent in some cases. There's some fairly decent loose parts you can get from the dollar stores. So thank you for that. Those are some great ideas and reminders of what we can do. So loose parts, they're encouraging children to explore. So these are pictures from Sarah. These are part of for infants from her program when she was in the center. So imagine what older children could do. I'm thinking about how this could work for preschoolers. So loose parts encourage children to explore, to experiment. And just imagine also the sound, right? Something like these washers, the sound when it hits the floor, that would be a very multi-sensory experience. So sound, I used to have some metal cups and small things, serving cups and things in my classroom, and my toddlers, one little guy discovered, and he could just drop, and the sound that he made was really, really fascinating. So experiment and thinking about sound as well as texture and these parts come up during design. Just create their own ideas. Loose parts can let children create and construct, and putting things together in ways that we wouldn't have thought of, right? And so that's where it's important for us to allow for a certain amount of what I call cross-pollination. So there used to be a strategy, philosophy in early childhood that things have to stay in their area. And I understand where that comes from, because you want to keep order in the classroom, I guess. Not order is not the greatest word, but you want to keep it kind of orderly, and everything, if everyone takes all the things everywhere, then it just becomes chaos. And so it was always keep this here, keep that stays in the block area, that stays in the housekeeping area. But that's also limiting terms in terms of what children's possibilities could be, right? So with this term called cross-pollination, and allowing things to move around the classroom, but in a respectful and intentional way. And so if we're watching our children, how they use the materials, then we can allow for some of that. I know we had a sand table, and the children were baking at the sand table, and they wanted to bake in the oven. And normally, we want to keep the sand in the sand table because it's, it's a slippery hazard if it falls on the floor. But we said, okay, well, let's see what happens. And so we let them, of course, sand got all over the carpet, but then the greatest thing was probably getting the vacuum with them and helping them, have them help vacuum it up afterwards. That became even more of an exploration. So allowing children to put things together in unique ways, right? And then because they can look at things differently, and there's different ways of doing things. And so we want to find a balance between allowing this cross-pollination, but then also allowing and respecting how materials are used for other children as well. So giving them opportunity to figure things out and different ways of doing things, and being flexible in their play. They can think about their own creations, right? And figuring out what things don't work out, how they can figure things out, right? I think it's important for them to make mistakes and for things to not work out the way they want, right? And this helps build up that resiliency, right? Allows for independent play, self-motivation, creative thinking, right? So we all are understand how loose parts can do all of that for children. So open-ended materials, unlimited possibilities, and meaningful play experiences, right? That's what we want for our children. We want them to be able to have multiple outcomes, right? We want materials for them that are adaptable. No one right way to use them. Materials they can move around. They can take around the classroom with them, right? Beautiful. We want beauty for our children. We want them to be surrounded by awe and joy and wonder, and our loose parts can really help us with that. But underneath all of that understanding and our knowledge of how young children learn and are thinking about our environment, all of that is motivated by our values. And so we can't talk about loose parts and thinking about how to use loose parts intentionally without thinking about our values, right? So core values, fundamental belief. There are fundamental beliefs of a person or of an organization, right? If you're in a pre-primary classroom, your classroom has got, I call it the culture, right? A culture of a classroom, and that classroom culture is guided by values, and every program has got a culture, and they're all very unique. And I see even within a program with multiple classrooms, each classroom's got their own culture, and the culture is created by the people in the room, and what motivates them is their core values. And so they're guiding principles. And when we introduce loose parts, when you think about the values, like how do we do this? How do we approach this? And so you've all come here because loose parts is an interest to you, and it's something that you want to explore more. So there's already likely an underlying common set of values there. So we have to think about our own values and link those values to the vision of our program and also the vision of the other people we work with, right? So knowing that we all work in teams, we have to be able to articulate what we believe, and naming these values helps us to do that. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to try this. This is a new experience for me as well too, but I'm going to try doing this with you. So Melanie, an old Montessori teacher, right, Montessori, I certainly took a lot from the Montessori philosophy as well too. I incorporated some of the real life learning into my program as well. And I know Montessori is quite, their philosophy is quite based on, that there's ways to use materials, and children have to be taught to use materials. And I believe that children can be taught to use some things. Like there's actually technique to art, and that there's certain ways to use watercolors and rinsing off brushes and treating the bristles. And Sue Stacy is a big proponent of that in anything as art materials, that, they should learn that, don't take the marker and just crash the marker and do this with it, it'll break it, but make sure to put the lids on, those kind of things. So I think that there's a lot from the Montessori that I've incorporated into my philosophy too. So it is different though in terms of open-ended exploration for sure. So again, if we were in person, what we would do is actually do an exercise around values. And so let's try this. So this is a fun. So what's on this list is there's, I think, 56 values that people may have. If you're not on your phone, if you're on your computer, you can take your phone out and scan the QR code. I'm also going to put the link in the chat. But take a few minutes. I don't know if it's going to be 10 minutes. I'll just kind of watch. This is anonymous, so no idea whose answers are. But see if you can go through that list and choose 10 values that really speak to you, that guide your practice, that influence your philosophy and your way of being with children. So let's take a few minutes, and then we can actually look at a visual of what that can look like. So I don't know, should say, I don't want to take too long, because when I do this in person with people, we actually have cards. So every one of the values has got a little card, and it's actually a fast-paced kind of game. You get into pairs, and you got to do it really fast. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and then take a yes pile and do it again. Yes, no, and again, and yes, no, and quickly to get down to about 5 cards that you would finally end up with. So it's like a instinctual yes no kind of thing. So let's not take too long, but I'll give you maybe 5 minutes to do that. Let's say 10:55. Let's say 10:55. And if you're done early, you can type done in the chat window, and if everybody's done, then we can carry on. So let's just say work on this until 10. What's 10:55? Oh, you're done already. All right. Well, let's do that. Go through it and let me know when you're done, and then we'll carry on. So no more than 5 minutes, though, let's say. We'll move on by 11 o'clock for sure. All right, I do see most of the responses are in. If you want, we can even just continue to start back at 11 anyways, to get up again and stretch if you need to. And I'm just going to visualize this, so you can definitely see a lot of common values. That's pretty cool. All right, I'll get this ready and I'll put it on the screen for us. Or if people want to keep going, we'll just keep going now. And there's only 3 minutes, so it looks like everybody's done. So let me put this over here. And because there's so many of them, it's hard to see the. Let me see if I can make this bigger. But there's definitely a lot of common values. You can see compassion, right? Which, as educators, I mean, that's definitely one of our core is compassion for our children, for our families, having them learn compassion for others, respect, empathy, curiosity, creativity. A lot of C's, eh? Compassion, creativity, curiosity. And then we have adventure, kindness, love. So lots of very empathetic values for sure. And then we have some autonomy, community, determination, faith, honesty, learning, diversity, adaptability, trustworthiness, safety, responsibility, pleasure, passion, openness, knowledge, harmony, growth, fun and humor. We need to have fun, don't we? In our days, we have to laugh. Friendships, equality, challenge, truthfulness. So there's a lot of commonalities even within this small group. I imagine if there was, if we did this, let's say all the ECEs and pre-primary ECEs and really get a sense of what motivates us and what drives us. So imagine doing that as a game where you've got to go really quickly and divide yes, no. And then so of the 10 that you chose, if you had to eliminate 5 of them, which one would they be? And it starts getting pretty hard because they're like, oh, this is so important. But it really helps drill down and helps you articulate what it is that motivates us, right? So being able to see that, that compassion is shared. And not to say that the person that didn't choose compassion doesn't value compassion. Absolutely does value compassion. It's just when you look at all the possibilities and it's not either or, right? It's just looking at what really speaks to us. So creativity, curiosity, right? Respect. We want respect for materials. Absolutely. Respect for each other, empathy. So all of those kind of values, I guess I'll put that down and then we can go back to that, right? And if we look at the results and we see that we do have things in common, and I find it's a very good exercise for a group to do. I know we talk a lot about the image of children, right? The curriculum framework, the image of the child that's our foundation for everything that we do. And so, now that we know what's important to us, right? We think about what do we know about children? What do we know about what's to be true about children, right? That they are capable, confident, curious, right? All the things that we believe around children. We could do another brainstorming session and be able to identify, that a lot of those values probably the ones that we would identify with children, right? They're creative, they're compassionate, they can be empathetic. I've seen, there's this whole debate that young children, toddlers, and infants don't actually have true empathy. They just imitate behaviors that they see around them. And I've seen young toddlers show genuine empathy for a child who's upset. And I remember one time I was holding a child and she was really upset, crying, and the really hyperventilating, crying. And this little one comes over with a book for her that he knew that it was her favorite book. And he brought the book to her. And we don't do that as adults. We tend, when we comfort children, here has a book, right? But I think that was genuine empathy. He saw she was sad and he wanted to help her. So children can be empathetic and they absolutely do have compassion. So child's competent, but what does that look like in our classrooms, right? And so sometimes there's a disconnect between what we say and what we do. And so how do we bring those two together and see that what we believe can actually come out through our classrooms? And so when you think about loose parts and our image of the children, right? We all know children need the freedom to appreciate infinite resources of their hands, their eyes, and their ears, form, materials, sound, and color. Right. Sound was a big part of my program. I often we'd be even out in the park and we would say, oh, what does this sound like when we bang a stick against the garbage can, the metal garbage cans, and listen for sounds and things too, right? So we can easily see how loose parts can fit into what we believe about children and what we believe about our role with children as well, right? Children are in control. Children are active explorers. They're critical thinkers, right? They're curious, the curiosity, sense of wonder, problem solving, and finding multiple solutions, right? That divergent thinking is so important. Play becomes more meaningful and stimulating the sensitive, responsive to their intentions, right? So we always talk about loose parts. We always have to talk about safety, knowing that there's a way to present materials to children, and sometimes they may need to be more closely supervised. More so with the youngest children, of course, right? Thinking about putting things in their mouths. But intentional with also how we introduce it to children in general too, right? So, and knowing that there may be other children that might still be mouthers, they might still put things in their mouth, and that we have to think about that when we introduce those. So about knowing the children in your group, and just knowing what they're capable of, and the safety aspects of that. And yes, children with diverse needs. Yes. Whoop, here comes that cat again. So for infants and toddlers, right, and having the choke tubes, if you don't have one, you can actually, there's online, you can actually print off a template that you can cut out and make your own choke tube. People say use toilet paper rolls. That's good to a point. But what this choke tube actually does, in case anyone's curious, is it actually imitates the throat. So that's why this little thing is here, so that it would be like that, I guess. Like, I don't know, imitating, the throat. And so a toilet paper tube might not be completely accurate. So anything that would fit inside there and you can cover it, then it's not safe for the youngest of children. So safety for that, think about the durability, right? There's things that could be, the dollar store is great, but it is cheap, and the durability of materials, if it's breakable, sharp edges. We use the dollar store had those little red Solo cups, and I know the song's going to be in your head now, sorry. But we use those a lot in our classroom in a lot of different ways. But when they broke and they cracked and they broke, they were sharp, actually, surprisingly sharp. So thinking about durability. Another thing to think about, cleaning and sanitizing, especially post-COVID, right? We're still heightened to the cleaning and sanitation needs, and so we know that some wooden materials don't do well when they're washed and bleached and things too. And so thinking about the type of materials that your parts or objects are made of, inspecting materials. And then one thing too is washing. PVC pipe is a great material, but sometimes when they're cut, there's little pieces of shavings inside the pipe. So just things like that. And if you get wood from someone, making sure the splinters, there's things like that we know that we all have to scan for. Children learn most readily and easily in a laboratory type environment where they can experiment, enjoy, and find things out for themselves. So Loris Malaguzzi is the founder, the inspiration behind Reggio Emilia in Italy. And he refers to what's called tinkering. And so tinkering is like a really hands-on approach to learning. Is not a word that I don't hear very often in our programs, but I always think of my dad, like to tinker in the garage, like to figure things out and to fix things, or if something broke, he would tinker with it to replace it. He wouldn't want to have to buy a new one. He would never want to buy anything new. He'd always fix things and tinker and stuff. So I think of the word tinker, I think of my dad in the garage, but it's actually to making small changes something in order to improve or repair it, right? So we want to just play around with it. And so tinkering in its essence really is what Loose Parts is all about, right? Trying to figure things out. And so, getting a chance to tinker, getting a chance for us to just play around and tinker and experiment, and it's trying to really fully understand what their capabilities are. What can we do with these materials, right? And then I know with my youngest ones, I always would just let them even say glue. I wouldn't, we would give glue to my toddlers, and I would just let them have a pot with, the paint stick, glue stick thing, and let them play with the glue itself, and then figure out it's sticky, and it's viscous, and oh, it spreads, and what can we do with glue? And then what can we do with the glue now? Well, maybe you can attach things to the glue, right? And so just letting them experiment and figure things out. And older children, school-age children. I used to have a take-apart center for my school-age children in my center, and this was back when there were still VCRs and real mechanical type things, and broken VCR, something like that, and they would take them apart and screwdrivers and stuff, and open it up and see what's inside, and they do that at your school. Oh, that's great, Melanie. Yeah, it's so much more of our electronics is motionless and small, and can't really get screwdrivers and open it up, but there's still things out there. Remember, as a kid, even I opened up my dad's radio. He let me. I think he let me. I don't think it was. Anyway, I remember I opened up the radio and just seeing all of the things inside. Oh, tape, yeah. Oh, tape is wonderful, isn't it, Jenny? If we have time, I could actually share. I have a documentation I did with my classroom around tape, and how Loose Parts actually was the inspiration for an exploration of tape. Tape, yeah, and that conversation around tape leads to. Oh, geez, sorry, the animals are getting a little bit active. We had a conversation around tape and the values around exploration, but then also not being wasteful, and so there's a great conversation on that too. So let me see if I'll pull that out. I was looking at it yesterday, and I'll see if I can pull that out. If people are interested, we can maybe do that at the end if there's time. Yeah, electrical tape. Oh yeah, the electrical tape in different colors is and to figure out how to peel it and cut it, and yeah, tape is great. So we're looking at choosing materials. We kind of talked about what do you do when you're choosing materials? What do you what do you look for when you're choosing materials? Maybe you can make a list together in a chat window. What process do you take? Like, where do your loose parts come from? How do you gather your loose parts? Oh, you can see my cat is behind me on my printer. That's what you hear. Probably hear the little scratching. He's right there. Stuff from your sister's house. That's great. Yeah, I think of my sister-in-law. She was actually probably still is quite a pack rat. I could have really raided her house. Nature, yeah. Your mom always, oh, that's great. Aw. That's great, Kristen. And I still do think about out and about sometimes. Oh, that'd be really good, but then I don't know what to do with it because I just don't have that connection anymore. I still go to Costco, look at all their children's books to see if there's any good ones around. Containers. Oh, cool. Yeah. And then the connection with the outdoors, with nature, respecting nature, and that would be all part of it too. Yeah, so definitely nature is a great source. I've seen painting with pine needles. I've seen people do that. Tree cookies, they're called the tree cookies, where you get the slices. If you're ever lucky enough to talk to a tree company or something, and maybe they'll just slice them up for you while they're cutting trees down. So, great ways to bring in loose parts, thinking about then the intention of loose parts, extension of loose parts, right? Because again, it's not just putting stuff out and see what happens, right? We want to do it with intention, and we want to do it with how can we continue that exploration, look at the possibilities. So, the provocations, they're intentionally arranged for exploration. We used to have something after nap every time was going to be something curious or something to present or introduce. We would cover a table with a cloth, and then become like a mystery. Or sometimes I would do it at circle time. I'd have something covered with a cloth, and I wonder what's in here. And then it's this big mystery that we introduce together, right? So provocations, it wants to be sensorily appealing, colors and things like that as well. Thinking about the function, storage of the materials in the classroom, right? Because loose parts tend to be there's lots of things for loose parts. And so making sure the storage and easy to clean up. Thinking about color and intention, responsiveness, accessibility. You don't have to have everything out all the time, but have build up a collection that you can pull something out of. It took me several years, but by the end, I was trying to find a picture of how I stored the materials in my classroom, but I just got carried away with just looking at my old children and pictures and things, but thinking about not having to have everything out, but being ready to pull. So I think someone said you had a shelf of loose parts in your program that you can draw on when needed, to making sure there's not too many, right? So I don't know if anyone knows about schemas. Has everyone heard about schema theory before? I think schema theory and loose parts. I when I first heard about schema theory, it transformed my practice with toddlers, because it just, things made so much more sense. Oh, hang on. Hold on one second. I'm going to mute while this goes by. Sorry, my front of my house is very close to the street, and so we often have emergency vehicles going up the street, so they can get quite loud. So schema theory is looking at children's behaviors in a different way, I guess, so to speak. Behaviors or actions, play, because sometimes children do things that we just can't figure out, that don't seem to fit into a theme or fit into something that makes sense. And I found with younger children, once I started learning about schema theory, that everything fell into place with how I responded to the children and their play. So it's great. And I'm going to give you a link to a resource as well that will give you a lot more information around schemas and loose parts. So schemas can kind of be categorized into 8 fairly common ones. There are more, but thinking about transporting, moving things from place to place. People who like to fill up a little wagon and take things on them, fill buckets and carry things around. A trajectory is a movement through space, either of our bodies or of materials. So throwing, kicking, watching things moving through space sometimes can be a frustrating behavior when you see throwing, but you can use that in a positive way. We used to get big tubes and balls, and they can use those and ramps and things, the trajectory. So movement through space. Transforming is more like things changing form. So I often think of transforming, I think of more like sensory things like Play-Doh, transforming dry and wet things into something different, transforming red and blue color and mixing it and transforming to purple. Enclosing and developing, children who like to hide themselves or hide things in boxes, circularity, rotation, ordering, lining things up, right? So often you see children maybe line up every single dinosaur on a shelf, or line up all the cars back to back to back, or line up anything and everything that there's several pieces of. So that lining is actually like an ordering kind of schema. Connecting, disconnecting, taking apart, spatial relationships. This is a whole workshop by itself. This could be a whole day looking at schemas itself. But just to give you a really brief intro into it, if you haven't heard of it before, if not, just a quick reminder, thinking about how we can use loose parts. So sorry, if we can identify schemas, then it's easier to plan. So, you know what, this child may be exploring trajectory. What can we put in our classroom that will help them explore trajectory safely, right? Because trajectory is often one that can lead to some dangerous behaviors. So we observe, identify. It could be this, right? We're always just kind of doing educated guesses. But maybe it's this. And then what can we do? What can we put in our environment to help enrich that schema? So helping the children extend their thinking, using words that are relevant to their schemas, helping them join with others who may be interested in the same schema. And understanding that sometimes it may be a problem, like redirection is often really a good solution. So throwing, throwing snowballs is not the issue. Throwing snowballs at people's faces is the issue, right? Hey, let's throw a snowball at the fence. Or climbing. Climbing is not the issue. Climbing is a real trajectory kind of motion, right? Climbing on the bookshelf is the issue. And so let's find ways for them to climb. What can we get in there to that? So just kind of some of that redirection. And then some of the strategies, lots of practice, repeated practicing. So let them do it over and over and over again. These schemas, when you talk about passion, you talk about flow. When a child is really engaged in a schema, you really see a lot of that flow, that sense of hyper focus in on that. So repeated practice. Sometimes people get a little too quick with taking things in and out of the environment, letting things set for a few days and see how the children use it. And once they figure it out, then they'll use it more, and they'll use it more deeply and use it in different ways. And so we can have how we can introduce another element into their play to maybe make it go deeper, right? Extending their interests, we accommodate. And like I said, schemas can sometimes be compulsive. Like there's sometimes like the children that have to do this. And this is about that flow, right? About that passion. And so I don't know if anyone's seen or heard of this, but Michelle Thornhill. Oh dear. Michelle Thornhill. So she's created this document. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this in the chat. You can actually download this document from here. What copy? I know you can't see the document, it's too small on the screen, but make sure that works. Oh, it did work. Good. Okay. So if you go there, what you'll see is a document, and it make this bigger. So if your child loves things like train sets, buckles, Legos, this is about connecting, right? So putting things together. And then so there's ideas here, loose parts. Oh, popsicle sticks. Look at that. Matchsticks, golf tees. Golf tees are great. I have golf tees in it. If you get a golf tees in a pumpkin, golf tees, they can hammer a golf tee into a pumpkin. It's a perfect resistance for that. So golf tees, they're great. You go to the dollar store in the summertime and get a bunch of golf tees. binder rings, like natural loose parts, large play, recyclable materials, and examples for commercial toys as well too that kind of would fit into that kind of schema. So I think this is a fabulous document. I don't know, Michelle or Melanie, sorry. This could be another thing that you could post in the room to remind us of maybe that they're disconnecting, deconstructing, and this is what it looks like: cutting with scissors, knocking towers down, making Play-Doh into small segments. You ever tell them to cut the Play-Doh into tiny little pieces, right? Taking apart electronics, destroying objects, removing kashkud, like all these things that may be seen as destructive behaviors. It's even plastering. Oh, plastering too. Yeah, that's awesome. Right. So this hopefully this will help you even more inspiration for ideas. So it's about being intentional though. If you notice that children trajectory, cars, Superman, throwing toys, throwing food, jumping, knocking, expressive art, lots of things like that. Things that can help them explore that trajectory safely. So hopefully you'll be able to download that. I think sometimes I put links in here and it worked, and sometimes it didn't work. So were you able to get that link? You got it. Great. Okay, super. So you download it. Great. So that's a great starting point to look. Email to your leader. Right? Oh, that's great, Kristen. Oh, I love that. You got it too. Great. Okay, super. Glad that worked. So if you don't know about schemas, it's a great starting point for looking at different ways that children play, and looking at the way they play differently, looking at a way of observing and thinking about children that maybe it's not what we think it is, and it could be within these schemas. So glad you got that, and it's a great starting point to continue. Here's an example. This is from Sarah's classrooms. The ECEs in this classroom kept the laundry room key on a magnet toy at the top of the metal door. This child consistently showed interest in the key and often asked for the key to be taken down lower. He can explore the magnet and the key ring. So then the ECEs found more key rings that are the same as a laundry room key and the magnet toys. And then they provided a safe way to explore the magnets with infants. Of course, we know with magnets too that it's really you have to be really careful with the magnets. But these magnets were embedded inside the plastic, and if you look at the plastic, it's magnet's not accessible. And so, what is it about that? Is it the key? Is it the magnet? The idea of sticking and pulling apart, right? And so, just thinking about that and providing more ways for that child to explore that interest. Thinking about intentionality. So again, this all comes from observation of children, and so supporting children in their questioning, thinking about how things work and what we can do for a provocation for that thinking. So here's a story from Sarah as well that using our knowledge of materials and children's interests, then finding ways for children to be able to explore that. So in this infant classroom, the children were spending a great deal of time exploring the hole in the floor of a climbing structure. So the little hole that's right in the middle there that's used for draining, right? That if say the climber's outside, then the water can drain through. Children were constantly putting their fingers in the hole. They were going underneath and putting their fingers in the hole from the bottom. And children were still for days exploring things and realizing that they could poke something into the hole and have it drop down into the bottom. And so what they started noticing is that some child would be on the top, other one would be underneath, and they would actually push things up and drop things down in between the two children. And so, it was interesting that every child in this room seemed to show an interest in the hole. So, we could talk about what schema could that be. It's deep in thinking, but even just the idea of thinking about what next, right? What is it? So it's like the what's going on. So what does it mean? Now what? I always think about the what, so what, now what, when I'm observing children and thinking about intentionality. What's happening? So what does it mean? And now what can I do? And I think too often we jump too quickly to the what can I do? You can go on Pinterest, we can do this, we can do this and do this, and get all these ideas. But the ideas out there are endless, but it's slowing down what's happening. I think we don't spend enough time, generally speaking, as ECEs, with what's happening in the moment. And so they thought about it, and then so they offer some provocations. They offer some materials, and you think the milk crates and that little pegboard thingy and some different things that they could fit into there. And so this was a provocation that was presented to the children. I have a similar story in my own classroom. This was one of my children, and she was consistently putting pencil crayons through the little holes in our water bottle container. And so we had the same idea. What could we put in our classroom to extend that interest, And so we tried different things. This is a colander with pipe cleaners, right? But just looking at playing a different way and thinking about, what is it about that's intriguing? And sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we didn't get it right. But trying different things like that. So when it's extending their interest, right, and figuring things out. But I think the most important part of extending is us, and that's where our role can really deepen their play. And so I've got a learning story from my own classroom that Loose Parts was the inspiration and the motivation for this entire experience. So what happens when you roll a napkin ring down the rocker board? So one of the travelers accidentally discovered that napkin rings will roll when they get dropped on the ground in a certain way. And they also sound cool too if they're the metal napkin rings. After exploring that concept for a while, Cindy set up a provocation when Haley quickly came over to participate. So Cindy was watching the child roll this napkin ring across the floor and quickly, have to be quick, right? Thinking about what could we do next, what next, right? And thinking, what could it be? Could it be about the trajectory, the movement? And so we're lucky to have the rocker board in our classroom. And then so Haley came over. And so provocations, deliberate, thoughtful decisions. Again, this is a learning story, right? So explaining what a provocation is, takes on the ideas of children. Teachers provide materials, media, general direction is needed, but children take the ideas where they want. After Haley and Cindy experimented with the napkin rings for a while, Cindy asked Haley what else would roll. Haley went off, and these are items that she brought back. So she was searching around the room. She found a cylindrical block, a toy car, and a steering wheel. And we just have like a dollar store steering wheel cover. I don't know. It just ended up in our classroom. And so over the time, she was trying all these different ideas. And so she showed a complex understanding that items with certain properties would work better. Through a mental trial and error process, she was able to eliminate items that did not fit her parameters. Eventually, she found the balls that were part of a bigger toy and were able to envision another use for the individual pieces. So by the educator being involved, interacting and extending, and what else could we do and how else could we explore this? This became quite an extended experience. Cindy reacted with joy and curiosity when Haley brought the balls over. Together, they celebrated the success of this series of experiments. Right, so thinking about that and thinking how Loose Parts was the inspiration in the beginning of this whole experience, what had to happen to make that possible? Right, so we knew that the educator was tuned into the child's explorations. Oh, something's happening. Something interesting's happening over there. We catch it all the time. We don't catch it all the time. I miss lots of those opportunities, but when you can catch it, it can be magical, right? So tuned in. Something interesting is going on over there. I'm going to watch, right? Look for another way to set up a space where the child could further examine the knowledge. Environment was rich with materials that could be used in the experiment, and there was time to test, to search, to repeat. Like there was going back and forth for quite a few minutes, right? Of just each thing going back and forth and figuring it out. And educator was equally involved. It wasn't just put the things out and let them lead it and see what happens, right? This co-construction of the learning equally back and forth, kind of like a tennis match. And I always think of it like as, one person hits the ball over, whether it's a child or the adult. If the other person hits the ball back, okay, now it's my turn. And you get this back and forth, right? And you get this equal participation. So yes, look at the possibilities. So what happened was Sarah's instance, where they thought that they would use these materials for dropping and inserting things in. They actually had different knowledge than the teachers. So what they actually didn't push straws and chicks to the milk crate. Instead, they sat on them. And that led to further possibilities and further extensions, right? So they're pushing the milk crates up to sit at the table and look at books. And so they don't always go the direction we think they do. And in fact, I've seen toddlers use loose parts I would never have thought of in ways I'm like, oh my gosh, and of course, like that would make perfect sense after the fact. But just giving it out and watching and being a part of it. Here's another story from a learning story from my experiences. We had gotten this rack from the dollar store. I think it's like a cup rack, I think. Like you put it in a cupboard and you can put cups on top of it. Cheap wire rack. And we also got a bunch of plant hooks that you can use to hang from chains and things like that. So we put these loose parts out on the table at nap time, and we thought that the toddlers would hang the hooks on the wire rack. So we thought, if we put these two things together, I wonder what they'll do with it. Maybe they'll do this. And so we're hypothesizing, we're guessing. But then Ben found these materials and he started hooking them to each other. So then we had conversations of, I wonder if he had some previous experience. Maybe they had the game Barrel Monkeys at home, right? And so does he have prior knowledge of that kind of thing? And so he started taking things in a different direction, but we were equally involved, right? He made the chain go all the way to the floor. Then he walked over to Cindy to show her. They had a conversation about his discoveries. And then he turned to the shelf and attached a top hook to a basket. Then he got more hooks and continued to build the chain. So I don't know if I can make that bigger. So you can see there, he's hooked them to the chain and he starts making them longer. Then he paused. He looked around and saw this bead maze and he hooked them to the wire, and then he kept getting longer and longer and longer until he used all of them. And he started looking around and we're wondering, what else could it be? And so being able to just be a part of it and think, I wonder what's going on, right? And I know we get so busy in our days, but if we ever get the opportunity to be able to just think, what are they thinking? What can I do? How can I extend this? And just being present. One of my most magical moments was with this little one. And these pieces here were actually from renovation at a house in the neighborhood. They were making new stairs. So these are actually the cutouts of the risers, right? Like you can see the angle of the stairs, right? So these were a bunch of cutouts from the risers. And I said, hey, what are you doing with those? There's nothing. I said, can we take them? He said, sure. So every toddler grabbed one or two. We grabbed a bunch in our hands, and luckily it was close to the center. And we took them back, and they became part of our playground. They were just part of the loose parts in the playground. They were a little rough because they were just cut, and we had to sand them down. But they became a part of our playground. And this one day, this little one here was working, and I was curious. I just went over and just was watching. I didn't say anything. I was just watching. And then all she said was, my sculpture bridge. I'm like, oh my gosh, right? Like just 2-year-old, absolutely blown away by that. And so my learning story I wrote for her family, you saw something in these blocks of wood and purposely created something meaningful. So many questions we wish we could have asked you. How did you see a bridge in those pieces? Like, this is that curiosity mindset that we have educators too. How did you see a bridge in those pieces? What was the meaning of the two pieces you stood upright? You see, have those there. It was only after you placed them on the ends that you feel it was finished. Wonder if they were like the towers on the bridges between Halifax and Dartmouth. What do you understand about sculptures? You have some prior knowledge. We wish we knew what that came from. This showed us your thinking is really developed. You're now able to visualize something in your mind and recreate it in a symbolic way. So just being able to capture that moment and just, think about it and wonder, what is it like that they can be so capable and deep in their thinking. And so that's when I always think of this one and think of, being present and capturing those moments. But it's, so in terms of ideas, there's so many ideas out there, right? Like you think about containers for displaying loose parts and for using loose parts, and thinking thoughtfully around how do you present materials. I use trays a lot. I use a lot of trays in my classroom, and it helped individualize the play as well. So each child had a physical space that they knew was theirs that they could work within. But there's lots of different ways to present to children, and actually there are there's lots of stuff on the internet, but there's also this book. It's called Loose Parts and Inspiring Play in Young Children. And so if you Google the book Loose Parts, it's full of ideas, lots of beautiful pictures, but also lots of considerations around intentionally using loose parts as well. So they have this Loose Parts, which is the first book, and they looked at things like the senses and creativity, action, inquiry, right? So Melanie, you have this one. Yeah, it is. It's beautifully written. But they also have Loose Parts too. This is my copy. This is the one for toddlers and infants. And it looks at things in a different way with infants and toddlers. It looks at, how you introduce it to the littler ones. And, wait a minute here. Where's the list? Exploration of objects, assembly, exploration, stacking, filling, dumping, connecting, sorting, classifying, banging, pounding, pushing, pulling, inserting, twisting, rotating, balancing, transporting, climbing, swinging, throwing, trajectory, pretending, construction, right? So all of those kind of concepts that young children like to explore. And then they have Loose Parts 3 now, and then Loose Parts 4. So they have 4 books now around loose parts. And each book explores different elements of loose parts. So the 4th book looks at knowingness, self-awareness, critical reflection, connections, engagement, risk-taking capacities, intellectual risk, social emotional risk, physical risk, engagement, focus, concentration, the power of solitude, children as scientists, right? So really good books, not just for the pictures, but also for the writing around the pictures and the stories, and real life experience. So if you are interested in loose parts, I highly recommend starting with the first book there, just Loose Parts. And I can put the authors in the chat window as well. And this one comes from Howie Montessori. So Melanie, this is the picture Sarah found from HowieMontessori.com, and they have lots of ideas for how to present materials. So the authors of Loose Parts is Lisa Daly and right. So that could be a starting point as well for further exploration of loose parts. Just some more pictures presenting trays and bowls. Bigger loose parts can be in baskets, bins. We took milk crates and we would zip tie the milk crates to our chain link fence and put a lot of loose parts in our playground in the milk crates. Then the water could drain out and help kind of keep it organized. And just the way it's displayed and create the wonder and again lead to the naturalness of it, right? So things that are found, free, repurposed, purchased. Value Village. I think it's great, but it's not as great as it used to be. Salvation Army, Frenchies, surplus stores sometimes are really, really interesting source. Nature hikes, you can go Kijiji sometimes. We found, one of my coworkers found a boat on Kijiji. It was free, you just had to get it to the daycare. And so, not that it's loose part, but Kijiji can be a good place too. But it's not a concept that everybody understands from the get-go, right? It's something that sometimes you have to educate other people around the benefit of loose parts, right? So how do you share the value of loose parts with others? So these are some of the little ones from my room. the parts that I had over the years. Like these are PVC pipes cut in half. He was skiing. This is a Keurig coffee pod holder, and it swivels. So like actually you could turn it around both sides. I think we got that from Value Village or something. And these are the little red Solo cups that they can put in there. And if you notice too, a lot of loose parts play is around food. We got rid of all of our plastic food over time, and they replaced it with these. These are big gems that wouldn't fit in here, seashells. And they were able to, even toddlers, use symbolic play and substitute those for food items. And I find that food and cooking is a real big part of their play. Oh, Princess Auto, that's interesting too. I haven't been there for a long time. I think it was just amazing how she was able to stack these on top of each other. This one was a really fun one. We had an empty thing, and these are wiffle balls, like practice golf balls. We use those in so many different ways, but they were pushing them inside this hole, and the noise, the sound was great. It was noisy, but we had to control straws with Play-Doh. That's like a cup holder, mugs. You can hook the handle on there. Tongs, muffin trays, those kind of things. So possibilities are endless. But what we had to do is we had to kind of convince our director to see the value in this, but also our families. And so I did this documentation for our families as a way to introduce them to the practice in our center and to get them to help us. So I explained about, Simon Nicholson, what loose parts are, and how we've adapted it to early childhood. And then I explained to them what loose parts are: carried, moved, combined, redesigned, lined up, taken apart, back together. And then, so I started saying, we started introducing some materials and saw some really cool connections. So as I said, what do you see? Right. And so I see a cork, but Ben sees a drum, and he was actually tapping on it like this. It's like, oh, are you drumming? And he nodded, right? He was drumming. And I said, can you see it now? And then this is a drum we have in our classroom. We have that drum. And wondered if you made that connection to the shape. Again, we're guessing, but we want to share with the families. Adults see a foot massager, right? I see what that is, a foot massager, but we put it out, and for her it was a guitar. Sorry. So this was to my families to help them understand what was in our classroom and how we use loose parts, and then just some more ideas. This was actually my father, as a hobby, wanted to take up locksmithing, and so he had dozens and dozens of blanks for keys. It came with his kit. It was like a correspondence thing or something like that. And so part of it was these blank keys, and he never used them all. So I took them and brought them into the classroom, and they were, for the longest time, I don't know where they ever went, but the cups. And then there's more examples. These are embroidery tubes from say like embroidery shops, or like the the places where you can order shirts or jackets, stuff like that, and they embroider names and logos on them, like that kind of place. They're embroidery spools. They have dozens and dozens of those, and you can always go and ask for those, and those are a really great hit as well too. So just examples for the families. And then why we should have loose parts. They can be used anyway, adaptive, manipulated, creativity, imagination. So writing it to families and encouraging families to understand that. And then this is where we ask them, right? Take a look around your home. If you have any materials that might be intriguing, bring them in, right? We don't have to know how to use the materials. In fact, it might be better that we don't know. So you found a way to introduce it to your families and educate the families on the value of loose parts. Have them be part of the scavenger hunt. We're on the scavenger hunt list, and we're looking forward ... And you can have them be part of that process as well. So in order to be successful, right, everybody should be on board. If there's someone who doesn't understand the value of loose parts, then helping them, starting small, trying a few things in the classroom, having discussion, doing research and planning, right? And so whether it's a coworker, maybe in pre-primary, maybe sometimes the principals of the schools might understand, or families, right? So finding ways to have discussions and sharing that with them. So that's the end of the slides. Anything that you're still wondering about? I'm going to look for that tape documentation too while we're wrapping up here, because that was a great moment for me as well too. Let's see if I can find it. And if you have any questions, you can write them out in the chat window. Or any thoughts, anything to add? That's something that I missed. Is there anything that has worked really well for you? I'm just going to look for that. Oh, I know where it is. There it is. All right, so this would be one final story for inspiration, if you need it. Okay, so this is called Sticky. Again, this was some documentation that I had put in the hallway of my classroom. I'll actually show you the picture of what it was in the hallway. This was, again, a way to introduce it to families and to explain what emergent curriculum is and what it can look like with toddlers. So this is the display in the hallway. And this is what the words are. So emergent curriculum is quite different from the standard adult imposed teachings that we are accustomed to. Emergent curriculum is planned, the focus of learning, or what happens in the classroom as a result of interaction between teachers and children, both contributing ideas and reacting to them to build on appealing and worthwhile subjects. Emergent curriculum is socially and intellectually engaging and personally meaningful to children. Educators follow the children's lead, introduce new and exciting activities, sustain their interests. Method requires genuine responsiveness, attention to children rather than just educators' goals. Emphasis focused on developing social skills, problem solving, all that. So the most important goal with curriculum: inspire delight, curiosity, inquiry in the classroom. So here's where it comes in with loose parts. The following is an example of a project of how it can unfold in our toddler room. So what happened started out as a chance combination of loose parts turned into an in-depth exploration of tape. It all started when we observed some of the toddlers taking tissue paper and wrapping the gems. "I make present for you," said Charlotte. We were excited to see these connections and wondered where we could take it. Teachers started getting some ideas, but before we jumped ahead, we wanted to observe this current exploration some more. We noticed that this had become an interest as other children were starting to wrap presents too. After a few days, we asked ourselves, what else do you need to wrap presents? Tape, all kinds of tape. For the next several days, we offered different kinds of tape. We did not direct the exploration, but we watched to see where this would go. Some children were fascinated with the sticky sensation. Others were taping anything and everything. And yes, there were still many presents being wrapped. We also brought in little boxes. We went to the dollar store and got some little boxes that they could use to put things in as well. So we brought the tape in with our original idea of it being that is going to be something that the children were interested in, wrapping presents. And you can see here, I'll make it a little bit bigger, right, that they're taping everything. And then they discovered that tape can be unraveled. This was an interesting reflection for the teachers as we had to question our values. Was this wasteful? What was the significance in letting this play out? After more observation, we saw that the children had to cooperate to be successful. They also had to be considerate of others as they moved throughout the classroom and solved problems of maneuvering around obstacles. Definitely a lot of significant concepts being developed. So you can see literally unraveling an entire spool of tape and multiple spools of tape going across the classroom, around the children, playing in and out of everything, right? So it became quite an exploration, and like going literally across the entire classroom. We asked ourselves other questions as well. What was it about the tape that appealed to children? Was part of their interest just the stickiness, or were they more interested in unrolling something as far as they could? To investigate the hypothesis, we found other materials that could be unraveled. So we had a bunch of these in storage. We didn't use them anymore, but we had a bunch of the old borders that used to be around bulletin boards. This was also a way to extend this interest and add complexity to their investigations. From this, other interests were being formed. They wrapped the borders around their heads, pretend they were wearing crowns. Jenny, a peasant wrapping activity that his practical student did with cloth and books. Oh, that's cool. Cloth and blocks. Yeah, that's a good idea too. And yes, you can see, so the tape was very much a big part of the conversation. We always want to consider various ways of incorporating an interest. Not every child will want to participate in any given exploration. Because painting is a favorite activity for most every child, we wanted them to consider what would happen when we paint on tape and then layer it. This kind of open-ended creative activity appeals to the wide range of ages and interests we have. Each child can contribute to the project in different ways. Some children were very interested in cutting and placing the tape on the canvas. Others enjoyed their time painting the various colors. Many children were on hand for the big reveal. They worked hard at peeling off the tape. And so this went on for weeks. And you can see, like, this is the actual piece of art that they made. And the PowerPoint slides were taken right from the original documentation that we made. So I think this is important, to tell others what we do, right, and to share that with other people. So I was about trying to help the families understand why we do things, and what they see in the classroom that may be junk is actually really powerful and meaningful work. So that is it. So I hope that was helpful. I could tell, that we're all of the same mind in terms of loose parts. I didn't have to do any convincing or selling of the importance of loose parts, but you can share the love with other people too, and share the word, and just go beyond what to the what and so what, right? To go beyond the ideas, and that's the biggest message I think I can share, is to think about the intentionality with the materials and how we can be involved in it and really extend that. So there's 5-2, so I think that's a good place to stop. Thank you again for joining us this morning, and especially taking some time out of your summer. I appreciate that, and have a good rest of the summer. Hopefully the weather hasn't been the greatest summer for weather, but hopefully we still have a few nice days left. Jose, glad, and thank you. I'm glad that was helpful for you. And the documentation that goes hand in hand with it too, right? To really think deeply about what we do. So thank you again. And I don't know if you have my email. I can put it in here if you have any questions or want further. Oh, hang on. Oh, sorry. So if you wanted a reference that I didn't get the link, or if you want idea with the book or something, let me know. Yeah, and I'm sure I recognize some of the names, and I know we've crossed paths in the past, and I'm sure we will cross paths again in the future. And thank you for the work that you do, and keep doing it. So have a good rest of your day.